Hello, my beautiful PhD friends. So today we're going to go over my top 5 tips for PhD students, and these are things that I don't think anyone else is willing to tell you. If you're new to this channel, please remember to subscribe and hit that bell notification because I'm going to share with you everything I've learned about doing a PhD, doing a postdoc, careers, all the mistakes, and all the good things I've done as well. So please remember to subscribe because I want you to benefit from that. So doing a PhD and being a PhD student is very challenging, to put it bluntly. And what I want to do is just share the top 5 things that I have personally witnessed that I think you will benefit from the most. You know, there's loads of advice, and go check out my channel and my other videos because, there's so much information to unpack. But here I'm going to touch on the 5 top things that I think make for a great PhD experience and things that you have to be mindful of that maybe aren't obvious when you first enter. So the first tip is all about treating this PhD like a 9-to-5 job. Now, what I don't mean is like turn up at 9, leave at 5. What I mean is everything else around that. It's just like have a routine, have a lunch break, make sure that you don't take too much home. You know, it's natural to think about your PhD at the end of the day and when you return home, and that's normal, but try to separate out your life from your PhD. Being a PhD student is one aspect of your personality. Being a PhD student does not make up you as a person. It is a small part. And if you find that it's becoming, bigger and you're worried more and your whole identity is wrapped up in this subject and your research, essentially you're going to end up being dictated. Your emotions are going to be dictated by the results that you get and the success that comes or not or doesn't come through your PhD, and that is a terrible way to live. So remember that it is kind of like a job. It's a weird job where you have a lot of freedom and, depending on the supervisor, it can be a great experience or, it can be challenging at times. But remember that it is just one component that makes up you as a person. So treat it like a 9-to-5 job in the way that you approach it. And I think just having some perspective on that will help you when things are probably going to get a little bit tough and you're going to need a little bit of a boost to get through it. The second thing, and I've talked about this before, is politics is a big thing. In academia, I have never ever worked in a place where politics is such a massive component. Like, sure, everywhere has their office politics, but for some reason, the pumped up, egocentric supervisor just so each supervisor has got their own little kind of camp. So the way I kind of view it is each supervisor builds their own kind of castle, and each castle needs to be defended. And so they want research money, and they want lab space, and they want students. And because there's a limited resource, and because academic funding is getting scarcer and scarcer, and because PhD students, the good ones that they want, good in terms of they perform well in undergraduate, they're a limited supply as well. So it does get extremely political. Who's getting grants, who's not, whose research is rubbish. All of that really plays into the academic environment. And one thing I wish I had known is how political it really was. And I recommend to you that you just stay out of it. Just stay focused on what you can control, which is your PhD and your research. So, labs will feud, supervisors will feud. I've seen academics like shouting at each other, belittling each other, like all of it. It is not the main component, the horribleness, but the politics is always there. And so what I recommend to any PhD student is rise above it, just let the academics have their politics and just focus on your PhD and getting your thesis or your papers published, because that's ultimately what's going to benefit you. So the third thing I recommend is what I call zooming out. Now, zooming out means that as a PhD student, you are so focused on a tiny part of the world, a molecule, an interface, a book, a certain subsection of the population. But what that does is give you a really weird perspective of what's important and what's not. And so, one thing that always amazed me was, in the academic world, the academic currency are papers and grants. Oh, there wasn't a day that didn't go by where we didn't talk about publishing papers or applying for grants, and it just seemed like the whole world was also like that for some reason, because that's your only interaction with people. And so what I like to do is zoom out. When I used to do my PhD or do my postdocs and then go to a place where there weren't academics, I would talk about papers and they're like, oh, what are they? And you're like, oh shit, yeah, they're not the most important thing in the world. Same with grants. They were like, oh, what sort of grants are there? And it becomes such a kind of, I guess, a tiny culture that just focuses on the one or two things that are important and dictates academics' career success, which is papers and grants, that you forget that there's a whole wide world of people out there that give no shits about how many papers you've got or how many grant applications you've got in. And I think that's a very important perspective to take all the time. So my tip is to zoom out when you're feeling overwhelmed, or just regularly, once a month, just zoom out. Interact with people that aren't academics if you can. Interact with people that give no shits about paper. Focus on what really matters, which is relationships, your health, and happiness. Not like searching for happiness all the time, but just doing stuff that makes you happy, and getting away from that really insular, narrow perspective that I think academia and doing a PhD can force you into. Okay, number 4 is all about enjoying the journey. Now, what you've got to do, there's kind of two parts to this, I guess. The first part is enjoying the process will mean that you will inevitably get to the end. I kind of think of it about like marathon running. The one thing that gets you to the end of the marathon is one foot in front of the other. And that's this much of a step, right? But doing that over and over again will get you to the end. So you've got to enjoy that one step in front of the other process. And for you, it's getting data, it's writing up, it's all those things. So enjoy the journey, enjoy the process, because ultimately if you enjoy that process and you kind of find the best parts for it, for you, then what you can do is you will inevitably end up where you need to be, which is with a thesis, which is with PhD publications. That's part of it. So that's the first part. But the second part is, believe it or not, I've been out of academia for about 5 years now, 4 or 5 years, and I finished my PhD a very long time ago. And I do look back fondly on those times, although at the time, I'm sure that I was just frustrated. My prefrontal cortex hadn't developed enough for my emotional regulation. So I just, it was all like a big hassle and a blur, and I was always thinking. But just take moments to reflect on what you're actually doing. Now I look back on it and I think, I wish I had taken more time to enjoy the process of a PhD, like having things to research, finding out more about the world, interacting with very clever people on a daily basis. All of those things are very important. So enjoy the journey in both of those ways, and your PhD will be better for it. Okay, and the 5th thing is all about do not put up with bullying. This is a massive thing. And look, I'm making sweeping statements about the stereotype academic supervisor, but really, bullying really does exist in academia. It is absolutely horrible. And if you do not stand up to it, it gets worse. And I've seen it in a couple of ways. During my PhD, I actually changed my primary supervisor not because I was being bullied necessarily, but because, things were being made up about my progress and I was being sort of punished. And I was like, well, why? So I went above them and spoke to the head of department, and they were very understanding, and they made me change my primary supervisor. And that helped a lot. And also in my in my postdoc, I think it was genuine bullying. It was so weird. There was a supervisor I had, the primary supervisor of one of my projects. He'd be lovely for the majority of the time, but every so often he would shout during a meeting. He would shout, slam his fist on the desk. He once said to me, "Get me those results," or "Get me that result." And I was like, that's not how science works. I can do the experiment and I can tell you how it ended up, but I can't like force a result that you want, you know, like. And so he slammed, and I actually stopped the meeting at one point because it happened every sort of like 3 or 4 meetings where it'd be fine, 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 and then explosion. And I actually stopped the meeting at one point. I said, "You cannot speak to me like this. I am an employee, and if you are going to continue like this, the meeting is going to be over." And so I cancelled the meeting, and he was always very apologetic at the end. And afterwards, he never said sorry. He used to come and practice his golf swing in my door while speaking to me. That was his way of kind of saying sorry, I think. But yeah, look, these things are real. Bullying does exist because academics are fighting for their careers. They themselves lose perspective on what's important and what is okay in a work context, because that's what it is. It's a place of work and you cannot be bullied. So yeah, never put up with bullying. You have got the power to cancel meetings, say, you know, politely that if you're going to talk to me like this, the meeting is over. And I've seen it time and time again where people and academics do get completely wound up for some reason and take it out on PhD students at meetings, and I have no idea why. So never put up with bullying. So there we are. There are my 5 top tips for a PhD student. A lot of PhD channels don't talk about some of the realities because they are still in the system. Doing a PhD is a double-edged sword. Like not only is it great academically, but it has got all these pitfalls, and the system in which it sits is absolutely flawed in so many ways, but it is such a great time. So it's a weird balancing act, and I feel like, yeah, other channels can't tell you about the bad side because they're in the system. So yeah, please subscribe because I'm out of the system and I'm happy to share with you everything that I've learned and I've witnessed in academia, because yeah, you need to go in with your eyes wide open and you need to understand what you're getting yourself into, and if you're in it, how you can best navigate that. So please remember to subscribe, give me a thumbs up, and share this video if it's been useful for you, and I shall see you in the next video.